The bush destroys every civilian assumption. Out here, weight is a predator and hesitation is a wound. The lie began when survival became a marketplace, when people were taught that safety came from stacking gear instead of understanding physics, biology, and terrain. Packs got heavier, choices got slower, and the illusion of preparedness replaced actual field capability. In real conditions, every extra object drains mobility, every redundant gadget increases fatigue, and every tool carried without purpose becomes a quiet threat waiting to break you at the worst moment. Operational units learned this long before survival became a hobby. Trackers, scouts, and long-range patrols stripped their kits down to systems, not souvenirs. They carried tools that erased human weaknesses, tools that multiplied leverage, protected body heat, preserved hydration, extended vision, and created structure from nothing. Nothing else mattered. The rule was simple and merciless. What you carry must keep you alive under pressure, or it doesn't belong on your back. To survive the bush, you don't add gear. You remove illusions. You cut the pack down until only capability remains. 7 tools, each one chosen because it replaces failure with function. The reset begins here. Functional density is the law that decides who lasts in the bush. Civilians pack objects, survivors pack ratios. A tool is not judged by what it can do, but by how many biological vulnerabilities it erases per gram carried. Humans enter the wild already handicapped. Weak claws, poor night vision, fragile thermoregulation, slow hydration loss, limited leverage. Any tool that doesn't meaningfully compensate for at least one of these limits becomes dead weight the moment terrain turns hostile. Gear culture collapsed this logic. People began collecting features instead of capability. Multi-tools with 20 attachments that fail under real pressure. Flashlights with modes no one uses. Fire starters that impress on video but die in humidity. These objects look functional, but carry almost no functional density. They don't reduce metabolic load. They don't increase mobility. They don't shorten tasks or expand operational reach. They simply exist, adding weight while subtracting endurance. Meanwhile, real field operators learned the opposite rule. Long-range patrols kept kits brutally lean because weight kills mobility faster than hunger or cold. Bush trackers carried only high-density items, tools that cut, burn, bind, shelter, or signal, regardless of weather, fatigue, or chaos. Each item extended human capability far beyond what biology allows. One blade replaced an entire toolkit. One shelter layer replaced multiple garments. One fire system replaced every primitive gimmick. Their loadouts were small, but their capability was enormous. Functional density forces discipline. It demands that every tool justify its presence through performance under stress. When applied correctly, the pack shrinks while survival probability rises. Strength is not in carrying more. Strength is in carrying what matters. The blade is the first tool because it replaces the greatest number of human weaknesses in the bush. Humans cannot cut, pry, carve, defend, or build with their bare hands at any meaningful speed. A single fixed blade corrects all of that. Not a folding knife, not a multi-tool, not a tactical novelty. A full-tang, field-durable blade that survives torque, impact, and weather without collapsing. Its geometry and material matter more than its appearance. A straight spine, a reliable edge angle, and steel that holds shape under punishment turn the blade into a force multiplier rather than a fragile accessory. Every historical survival record confirms the same truth. Explorers stranded in polar regions rationed food with blades. Jungle patrols carved shelters and defensive barriers with blades. POWs shape tools, traps, and escape aids from scrap because they managed to create or preserve a blade. The blade is not a tool. It is the foundation of all tool creation. With it, you shape wood, split fiber, prepare food, craft stakes, process game, and create every secondary structure required for extended survival. Without it, your workload multiplies, your calorie burn spikes, and your operational tempo collapses. In the bush, the blade reduces metabolic expenditure more efficiently than any other item. Cutting shelter poles with a proper blade takes minutes. Doing the same task without it drains hours and energy you cannot replace. Processing kindling with a blade accelerates fire preparation, which accelerates warmth, water purification, and psychological stability. Even basic food access becomes impossible without a sharp, sturdy edge. The blade turns raw environment into usable material. It converts chaos into structure. It also serves the final line of defense. Whether against animals or human threats, a durable blade provides reach, penetration, and deterrence that bare hands cannot match. Defense is not its primary job, but it is a critical capability in moments where hesitation is fatal. A single blade replaces entire categories of effort, gear, and risk. In every collapse, every wilderness, every war zone, those who had a reliable blade maintained control over their environment. Those who didn't were controlled by it. In the bush, you don't just carry a blade. You carry the ability to build everything else. Fire is not comfort. Fire is survival math. In the bush, heat controls hydration, digestion, wound sanitation, water purification, and psychological stability. Without it, the body loses thermal balance, digestion slows, pathogens thrive, and decision-making deteriorates. This is why every functional loadout carries a fire system, not a single tool. One lighter, one ferro rod, one redundancy that survives weather, stress, and fatigue. Civilian kits fail because they chase novelty instead of reliability. Transparent plastic lighters crack. Ferro rods paired with soft strikers throw weak sparks. Tinder kits absorb humidity and rot. The bush exposes these weaknesses instantly. The physics are simple. Ignition requires heat, fuel, and oxygen to align under pressure. When humidity rises or wind accelerates, the margin of error becomes razor thin. A proper fire system collapses that margin. A butane lighter delivers instant flame for quick start situations when your hands tremble or your core temperature drops. A ferro rod provides long-term ignition unaffected by moisture, cold, or mechanical impact. Resin-rich, natural tinders, carried dry and sealed, ensure flame even when the landscape is soaked. The system works because each component compensates for the other's failure modes. History repeats this truth. Arctic survivors lived because they maintained ignition sources in pockets close to the body, preventing freeze damage. Jungle patrols in Southeast Asia kept dry tinder sheathed in inner layers because humidity could kill flame faster than rain. Shipwrecked castaways rationed sparks like calories. Every successful account of long-term survival begins with fire, and every fatal account begins with its absence. The fire system reduces energy expenditure across every task. Cooked food extends caloric absorption. Warmth reduces metabolic drain. Purified water prevents infection. Even controlled smoke stabilizes morale when isolation begins eating into cognitive endurance. In the bush, fire is not optional. It is your heat, your water, your medicine, your signal, your night control. When the cold closes in, you don't want a gimmick in your hand. You want a system that lights every time. Water is not a resource in the bush, it is a countdown. The body loses clarity before it loses strength, and it loses strength before it loses life. Dehydration begins with cognitive drift, slower reactions, poorer decisions, rising irritability. These failures compound until mobility collapses. This is why your kit needs a water unit, a system built to find, carry, and purify water under pressure, not a gimmick filter, not a bottle packed with accessories. A streamlined setup built around reliability, speed, and endurance. The first element is purification. Terrain water is never safe. Surface runoff carries bacteria, parasites, and chemical contaminants invisible to the eye. A field-grade filter removes particulates and pathogens, while chemical treatment neutralizes what the filter cannot reach. Together, they eliminate the biological threats that cripple survivors faster than starvation. Refugee corridors, military retreats, and long-range patrols all documented the same pattern. Sickness from untreated water killed more people than direct conflict. The second element is carrying capacity. Water is heavy, but mobility without it is fantasy. A collapsible container paired with a durable primary bottle ensures you always have reserve volume when terrain turns dry or unpredictable. In real scenarios, you don't drink water, you manage it. Every liter is mobility fuel, allowing you to climb farther, signal longer, think clearer, move faster. Without carrying capacity, even clean water becomes useless because you cannot transport enough to maintain operational tempo. The final element is acquisition. Streams, vegetation zones, depressions, and animal trails reveal water long before you see it. The water unit works only when paired with awareness. You scan terrain not for scenery, but for moisture vectors. The earlier you locate water, the fewer calories you burn chasing it. A proper water unit keeps the body hydrated, the mind stable, and the movement consistent. Without it, no tool, no skill, no fire, no shelter can compensate for the slow collapse dehydration brings. In the bush, water isn't a priority. It's the clock ticking behind every decision. Shelter is not a structure. Shelter is thermal control. The human body burns calories to maintain core temperature, and when the environment steals heat faster than you can replace it, survival time shrinks to hours. Cold drains energy. Heat drains hydration. Wind accelerates both. This is why every bush loadout carries a shelter layer, a system that protects your core from exposure, reduces metabolic burn, and stabilizes performance when weather shifts without warning. The civilian mistake is thinking clothing equals shelter. Layers help, but fabric alone cannot stop convective heat loss or shield you from rain-soaked ground, pulling warmth straight from your spine. What you need is a compact, durable, fast deployable barrier between your body and the environment. A tarp with reinforced tie-outs, an emergency bivvy that reflects heat, a ground sheet that prevents conductive loss. These pieces transform terrain into insulation and turn hostile weather into manageable conditions. History proves that exposure kills faster than hunger. Soldiers in trench warfare lost movement capability because wet clothing and cold ground drained their strength. Desert patrols collapsed from heat load, their bodies unable to shed temperature fast enough. Polar expeditions documented mental decline triggered by prolonged cold stress long before frostbite appeared. In every case, failure to control thermal exchange destroyed operational effectiveness. A proper shelter layer has one job: preserve calories. When you stay dry, you burn less. When you stay insulated, you think clearer. When you maintain core temperature, your hands remain functional, your reactions stay sharp, and your decision-making does not degrade into panic or fatigue-induced errors. Shelter is not about comfort. It is about keeping the machine running at stable output. A tarp pitched correctly becomes roof, wall, windbreak, and thermal trap. Combined with heat from your fire system, it creates a microclimate that multiplies survival probability. Even in hostile terrain, a minimal shelter layer restores control. It turns terrain from an enemy into a temporary ally. In the bush, you don't sleep for rest, you sleep to recover calories. Shelter is the tool that makes that recovery possible. Light is control. Darkness is surrender. In the bush, the moment visibility drops, terrain becomes a weapon. Roots turn into traps. Predators gain the advantage. Navigation slows into hesitation, and hesitation is the precursor to injury. This is why every stripped-down survival kit carries a light and signal core. Not decorative lanterns, not multi-mode gimmicks, but a single dependable flashlight with a focused beam backed by spare power and a signal method that cuts through night, fog, and distance. Humans are biologically weak in low light. Our eyes fail long before our instincts do. Depth perception degrades. Orientation fractures. Tasks that take seconds in daylight take minutes in darkness, draining calories and increasing risk. A proper light source reverses that disadvantage instantly. With a narrow, penetrating beam, you gain reach, clarity, and command over terrain that wants to hide hazards. You spot trails, eye shine, movement, and structure before they reach you. You reduce the time needed to build shelter, prepare tinder, treat wounds, or navigate dense brush. Light multiplies the effectiveness of every other tool in your kit. Power management is part of the system. Spare batteries sealed against moisture, a light body that resists impact, switches that don't activate by accident. In real operations, the people who lasted didn't carry the brightest tools. They carried the ones that turned on every time, in rain, in cold, with numb fingers and shaking hands. Blackout survivors, jungle units, and post-disaster search teams all learned the same lesson. Failure in darkness is exponential. Signal capability is the second half of this tool. A whistle, a reflective surface, a high visibility strobe, something that cuts through distance when voice and movement fail. Signaling is not glamour. It is geometry and contrast. It turns a search area into a targetable point, collapsing rescue time when mobility is compromised. Light is not luxury. It is dominance over the hours when most humans lose the fight. It restores vision, stabilizes movement, and prevents the slow cascade of errors that darkness triggers. In the bush, the one who controls the night controls the outcome. Cordage is structure. Without it, the bush remains raw, unshaped, and hostile. Humans lack claws strong enough to dig, bind, or haul. We cannot tension wood, suspend loads, or secure shelter with our bare hands. Cordage solves that biological weakness. A single length of paracord or high tensile line replaces hours of labor, reduces risk, and multiplies what one person can build alone. It is the quiet engine behind traps, shelters, repairs, hauling systems, and every improvisation that turns terrain into advantage. The physics are simple. Tension creates strength. Knots create control. A thin line applied correctly generates far more mechanical force than muscle can deliver. With cordage, a tarp becomes a weatherproof shelter. A bundle of sticks becomes a frame. A heavy load becomes movable. A broken strap becomes functional again. In the bush, everything that holds, binds, lifts, or suspends depends on cordage. Without it, even basic tasks escalate into calorie-draining struggles that collapse endurance long before the day ends. Field history confirms this. Trackers lashed poles into stretchers to move wounded men across terrain no stretcher could cross. Long-range patrols used cordage to repair gear under constant strain. Hunters built snares that worked while they slept, converting time into food. In cold zones, cordage secured shelters against wind that shredded loose fabric. In storm-prone regions, it kept tarps from detonating into the night. When collapse zones stripped people of manufactured goods, the ones who survived longest were those who knew how to tension, anchor, and bind. Cordage also scales. A few meters can be divided into smaller segments for traps, fishing setups, or gear repairs. It can be braided into thicker lines. It can be stripped for inner fibers to create tinder or thread. High-density cordage is not just a line. It is a modular system of leverage that adapts to every environment you enter. Its true power is time compression. Tasks that take an hour with improvisation take minutes with proper cordage. Minutes saved are calories saved. Calories saved are endurance gained. Endurance is survival. In the bush, nothing stands, holds, or lifts without tension. Cordage is the tool that gives you that tension on command. Everything in the bush decays. Metal bends. Fabric tears, seams fail, moisture rots stitching, heat warps plastic, impact loosens fittings, entropy is constant, and it works against you every hour you remain in the wild. This is why a survival loadout needs a repair and adaptation kit, a compact set of materials that restore function when gear begins to break under pressure. Not a toolbox, not a hardware store. Just the essentials that let you fix, reinforce, or reshape the tools keeping you alive. A proper repair kit carries items chosen for their adaptability. Metal wire for structural reinforcement. Tape that bonds even when material is wet or frayed. Needle and thread strong enough to rebuild clothing. Patch tarps or reseal straps. Resin or adhesive for cracks that would otherwise spread under load. These components are small, but their impact is massive. A torn tarp becomes shelter again. A loose grip becomes usable. A broken strap stops being a failure point and becomes a functional anchor. Every fix extends the lifespan of your gear and prevents the slow degradation that turns minor damage into catastrophic loss. History shows that improvisation alone is not enough. Isolated soldiers in long campaigns survived because they repaired their equipment daily. Explorers stuck far from supply lines learned that the difference between life and death was not the number of tools they carried, but the ability to keep those tools operational. Collapse survivors who endured weeks instead of days were the ones who stitched shoes, rewired lanterns, patched containers, reinforced handles, and reclaimed broken parts instead of discarding them. The repair kit wasn't an accessory. It was their only supply chain. The power of this tool is not in fixing what breaks, but in enabling adaptation. The moment you can alter the shape, function, or strength of your gear, the bush stops dictating the terms. You do. Adaptation extends duration. Duration creates stability. Stability increases the probability of extraction or recovery. In the bush, everything wears down, except the person who knows how to restore it. Survival in the bush is not a contest of gear. It is a contest of math. Weight versus endurance. Heat loss versus calorie burn. Hydration versus terrain. Visibility versus movement. Every decision either adds to your operational lifespan or subtracts from it. When you strip the pack to 7 high-density tools, you stop fighting your own equipment and start fighting only the environment. That shift alone increases survival probability more than any gadget ever produced. The lie told to civilians was that more gear equals more safety. But history, field records, and collapse events all show the opposite. Overloaded people move slower, tire faster, react poorly, and make mistakes that cascade into injury or exposure. Mobility wins, clarity wins, precision wins. And you gain all three only when your load is lean enough for your body to maintain tempo under pressure. With these 7 tools, every critical survival domain is covered. The blade shapes environment. The fire system controls heat and water. The water unit sustains cognition and mobility. The shelter layer preserves calories. The light core dominates darkness. The cordage system builds structure. The repair kit extends everything you carry. 7 tools, each one compensating for biological limits humans cannot overcome alone. Reduce the pack, and the numbers shift in your favor. Increase the pack, and the numbers bury you. Survival is not emotional. It is a balance sheet, and the bush always charges interest. Strip away the illusion. Carry only capability. 7 tools, 0 excess, 0 excuses.